You've dealt with nuclear energy for years now. So give us your sense of the role of nuclear energy potentially in getting to net zero.
Well, I think nuclear can play a huge role, at least in the transition from fossil fuels to renewables. Renewables are not yet base energy. They're peak shaving. And we're a 24/7 society, as is the rest of the world. The world is 24/7. And nuclear is the only form of base power that releases no regulated pollutants or greenhouse gases while it's producing power. And we have an incredible safety record here in this country on nuclear, and actually with few, obviously, very huge exceptions, being Chernobyl and what happened in Fukushima Daiichi. Overall, worldwide, it's been safe and getting safer all the time. I mean, the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission is considered the gold standard on regulatory oversight of nuclear reactors. I don't think, given costs and time, that we're going to see any more large reactors built in this country, certainly. They are being built in China. They're being built around the world, and we can certainly play a part in developing the parts for those reactors. But I see the future for nuclear right now being in the small modular reactors.
Well, let's get to that in a moment. But first of all, give us a sense of the scope of it already. One of the things that I have learned is nuclear is actually one of the few things that really don't have emissions that can be taken to scale. I think something like 20% of energy in the United States is generated by it, 70% in France.
Right. And, you saw an example of what happens when you take nuclear offline. When California took the San Onofre nuclear reactor offline, their emissions went up and the cost of their energy went up. I mean, it was totally counter to everything that they were hoping to achieve, in my mind. And so what I've found over time is that if you have an opportunity to talk to people and answer their very real questions, I mean, it's normal to have questions about the safety, and you should ask them. But the answers are really good, and they're based on our history. You can prove that, in fact, these things work. And once you do that with people, they get much more comfortable with the idea of nuclear. It's just that for so long, it's been used as, frankly, a fundraiser a lot of times for the environmental groups. And we need to get the public to understand, particularly with the new small modular reactors that are built in a contained facility. They can be placed on site. They're much safer technology. They are a much safer way to produce the nuclear energy. So overall, they are really, I believe, have the potential to make a huge difference, particularly if you think about the rural parts of America where you're not on the grid or you're not close to the grid. You can take a small modular reactor and provide power for an entire town or an entire business. So they have a lot of potential there.
So let's pursue that question of safety, because that is on a lot of people's minds, without a doubt. And as you've mentioned, we've had some horrific instances. Is the issue with safety that people don't realize that actually the track record is quite good for nuclear, or is it technological developments such as you're referring to, small modular reactors?
No, I think it's because people just don't know. They don't understand. I mean, I get a lot of questions, I used to in the past, about, well, what about the spent rods? And first of all, I tell them from the time when we had 102 nuclear reactors in this country, and you took all those spent rods and you put them in one place, you'd fill up one football field to the height of the goalpost. They may have gotten slightly above that now because this was data from several years ago. But the point being, it's not this massive thing, this size of the state of Vermont, that people kind of have in their minds. And the other thing is that what's in those spent rods is 87 to 90% fissionable material, meaning unused energy. And in France and Japan, they figured out how to reprocess that and to get the energy out of those rods, rendering what you have is the quote unquote bad stuff down to 15%, let's say. And it can't be used in a nuclear weapon. So it's much easier to store, much less to store. You have a lot of unused power just sitting there in these spent rods. And we should be using that technology as well. And people have to understand, and when you explain it to them, you can't take one of these rods from a nuclear reactor and put it in a missile. It's not the same technology. It won't work that way. And the other thing that explained to them, because one of the most immediate issues that we had in this country was 3 Mile Island. And when that went down, the operators in the utility itself, in the reactor itself, were never exposed to high levels of radiation. And they've been tracked ever since. There were no releases into the community. And even those who were right there in the reactor had no adverse reaction to what happened. And in fact, it was because they overrode the system, really, that you had the partial meltdown. Fukushima Daiichi, that wasn't because of the earthquake, it was because of the tsunami. And that was because they had their backup power, their generator, located physically in the reactor building. After 9/11, our Nuclear Regulatory Commission said to our nuclear industry, you got to move those out. They cannot be co-located with the reactor itself. So that kind of thing can't happen here anymore.
Just this week, we saw an announcement of a deal to acquire Westinghouse Electric, basically on the premise that, in fact, we're going to have more nuclear energy. Do you anticipate that in the United States?
Well, I certainly hope we do, but it was, not even 10 years ago, I guess, there were four proposed reactors, 2 in Georgia and 2 in South Carolina. And we were very hopeful that those were going to come in on budget and on time. And they both ran over, and the utilities decided in each case that it just wasn't worth going forward. So it is a question of cost and regulatory hurdles, but you want to have those regulations in place because that's what protects the community and makes sure that things are safe and streamline how you approach them so that you make them go through all the hoops they have to for safety, but to put it to the front of the line to get this power online. The big problem we have, though, when you talk about all of this, is the grid itself. It's old. It needs to be revamped. It can't handle a lot of new power coming in. And that's one of the big challenges that seems to get overlooked a lot when we're talking about these issues. Again, you go back to small modular reactors, which can actually function on their own.
What about the grid? Are we investing in the grid? We have the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We also have the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which had money in there as well. Is there money in there for the grid? Is it enough?
There is money in there for the grid. Whether it's enough or not, I doubt it. Hopefully, the money that's there will be spent in a way that ensures that nothing is wasted, because we need every penny of it. Certainly, every penny that's in there is needed to get the grid updated and to where it needs to be in order to accept the new power, whether it's from nuclear or renewables. I mean, they're going to depend on that as well.